Hello and welcome to Let's Talk SEO. You might have remembered, and I've probably said this quite a few times, that ChatGPT, OpenAI, LLMs are not necessarily the game changer that people have made it out to be. In fact, there's a lot that's wrong with this technology, and there's a lot that's going wrong with this technology that people want to acknowledge. Now, in a recent piece by Futurism, they found an investigation by the New York Times and also by Futurism found that ChatGPT doesn't just plagiarize content. In fact, ChatGPT plagiarizes content from plagiarizers' websites. So this is third-level plagiarism. So is that considered plagiarism? So if you're plagiarizing content from already plagiarized content, will your content be considered plagiarized? I know it's funny, but what's the legal basis for it? I mean, is there a legal definition? At what point, like, is second-level plagiarism not considered plagiarism? Is third-level plagiarism not considered plagiarism? I don't know. This is something that a legal expert will probably have a better idea when it comes to addressing it. But an article by Futurism says that what they found was that ChatGPT, and after the December lawsuit by the New York Times, so ChatGPT stopped quoting the New York Times, stopped plagiarizing the New York Times. But what ChatGPT did instead is it has now started to plagiarize a website that's already plagiarizing the New York Times. So this is an Armenian website that goes by the name of DNyuz.com, which plagiarizes the New York Times, and it plagiarizes entire stories from the New York Times. So it's just copies and pastes it. It uses a bot to copy and paste it, paste all of the news stories. And they're making a pretty penny doing it, by the way. Interestingly, Google has not been able to catch on to their site. Their website ranks very well. Not only that, but ChatGPT is now sending traffic to their site. And I'll put screenshots of what's going on over here. And again, if you want to read the whole news article, go to futurism.com. There's a link in the description. You can read the article in its entirety. I'm not going to go through the whole article here, but I'm going to go through the most interesting parts that at least I find interesting, and I think a lot of you guys in the SEO industry will find interesting. So DNyuz is a notorious pirater of news. Back in 2020, a BuzzFeed news investigation found that the site made a significant amount of money by copying and pasting publications, including New York Times, The Atlantic, The Daily Beast, Bloomberg, and the Associated Press, and running ads on stolen content. After the piece was published, Google kind of took them down, and they weren't doing so well in Google. That was only for a time being, and it was more because Google took down their ads. So they were monetized with probably Google ads, and then Google ads said, we're not gonna monetize your content, or we're not gonna pay you for plagiarized content. But they still do pretty well in SERPs. And so if you do a search for a news piece, you'll probably see them pop up in Google and also other search engines like Bing. But that's where the problem is, because when it comes to LLM, it's very hard to predict what an LLM will produce. And this is why I say, when people say LLM search engines, it's not really that easy, and it's not really as straightforward. And I've spoken to LLM engineers, and they've told me that it's very hard to build an LLM search engine unless they are barriers and they are gatekeepers and gatekeeping technology put in place. It's very, very hard to train an LLM to be a search engine. Anyway, so it's particularly egregious for ChatGPT to cite stolen content from the New York Times because the newspaper is already suing OpenAI for copyright infringements. Its suit, filed in December last year, argues that OpenAI unlawfully uses its journalist work without permission or compensation to train ChatGPT and that OpenAI and Microsoft, which has invested billions into OpenAI and integrated AI models throughout its own products, use that proliferated work to build a competing product. Now, I'm not sure what they're referring to as a competing product. I would assume the competing product is generating content, perhaps, but then it's not clear here. What the New York Times has said is that defendants seek to free ride on the Times' massive investment in its journalism. Reads the complaint further alleging that OpenAI and Microsoft have used the Times content without payment to create products that substitute for the Times to steal audiences away. Okay, so that's what they mean, is that they're creating a content mill, in other words, that's stealing content and traffic from the New York Times. But it's not just OpenAI that's doing it. There are others that are also doing it, which I don't want to mention in this video for obvious reasons. Before this lawsuit was filed the New York Times had already taken measures to block OpenAI from accessing its work, disallowing multiple OpenAI web crawlers from scraping its site. But despite the New York Times lawsuit and clear efforts to block ChatGPT's crawlers, OpenAI's chatbot continues to use its work by building answers on copy-pasted ripoffs from DNyuz's content mill. Now, let me explain why this might be happening. When you type in a question, let's say they type in a question over here asking about the late William Goines, for instance, a barrier-breaking Navy SEAL who died earlier this summer, resulting in ChatGPT basing its answer on DNyuz's plagiarized version of the New York Times obituary of Goines. And the reason why I think this is the case is because the New York Times covered Goines, William Goines, and no other website covered William Goines. So when the New York Times blocked ChatGPT from crawling its content, ChatGPT crawled other content that had a relevant answer. So it went onto DNyuz's website, it found the answer, it found the content it was looking for, and it reproduced it. And so if there were, let's say, 6-7 other websites that were as prominent as DNyuz, then they would also be cited in the answer. But that was not the case. And since OpenAI can't crawl the New York Times, the LLM looks for the next best thing, in which case it's plagiarized content. And I'll show you other instances of this, which is also in the article. Then they ask about Saudi Arabia's $40 billion investment in AI. ChatGPT once again proved us with a swindled DNyuz's version of the original NYT reporting. Again, now this news story may have been covered by other sources because it's a huge news story about the Saudi Arabia's investment. But the problem is it found the most relevant news source that it had in its training database, and it reproduced it. And if you look at the answer, it's not just quoting DNyuz, but it's also referencing AI Arabia and Press Express, both of which carry this huge news story. So in instances where there are other sources, OpenAI is, in all fairness, citing them. And it can't cite the New York Times because it's not allowed to crawl, or it's not allowed to train itself on the New York Times latest news story. So ChatGPT also sometimes bases its answers on DNyuz, the ripoffs of other publications. Asked about the health of famed linguistic and activist Noam Chomsky, the chatbot cited another article plagiarized by DNyuz. Now again, I think this is a little unfair because it also cites The Independent, as you'll see in the screenshot. But since it was only covered by the New York Times and then again copied and pasted by this other website, it was the next best thing, so it went ahead and cited that site. Because OpenAI has no way of knowing for sure whether a site is plagiarizing content or whether the content is original. So when there is a ChatGPT search engine that finally goes live or it starts going live, you're going to see a lot of this type of stuff going on, and there are going to be a lot of lawsuits because I could just buy a domain with high authority, copy and paste other people's content, and I could do very well in ChatGPT. And depending on the popularity of ChatGPT, I could make a lot of money. Again, if it sends me a lot of traffic. If it doesn't send me any traffic, then there's no point of doing it. And there are other instances that have been cited in this article. Again, I'm not going to go through the whole article. If you're interested, read the article in its entirety. Again, it's linked in the description. In my opinion, this is bound to happen, and that's the way LLMs work. It's very hard to predict what an LLM is going to do, where it's going to pull its information from. And I think as this lawsuit proceeds, and there's discovery, and there are testimonies during the hearing, we will see that OpenAI has very little that it can do to curb this from happening, other than just block OpenAI from crawling sites. There's very little that can be done. Let me know in the comments below what you think of this. Is ChatGPT plagiarizing content, or if there's a perfectly reasonable technical explanation for this, like and subscribe as always, and I will see you in the next video.